Hello, everybody, and welcome to the World Elephant Day celebration here at the Explorers Club. My name is Mark Fowler. I am the Vice President of Wildlife Conservation here at the club, and I am so honored to be introducing the founder of World Elephant Day and all of our great scientists and explorers that are out in the field working hard to save elephants. I mean, elephants are one of our most magnificent animals on Earth. And I have to say that I was so excited to be a part of tonight because World Elephant Day was one of the first times that people had brought so much attention to saving one of our most magnificent animals. We had been fighting to save elephants for decades, but this day has made it into a global event where millions of people are focused on saving elephants. And when Patricia Sims, who I'm going to be introducing, when she launched World Elephant Day in 2012, it was a dire time. Elephants were being decimated overseas in Africa. They were and in Asia. The numbers were plummeting. And so when they launched and when Patricia launched World Elephant Day, it literally buoyed up the whole movement and gave hope to millions of people that we could do something. And I think we're all going to be celebrating tonight the work that has been done. We have incredible explorers from all around the world that will be speaking tonight. Patricia is an international fellow of the Explorers Club and has spent 30 years producing films and documentaries that fight to show the importance of saving wildlife. She's collaborated with world conservationists, leading conservationists, scientists, and explorers for all of those years. And her dedication brought her to producing 2 award-winning documentaries about endangered Asian elephants, one called Thailand Return to the Forest in 2012, and Elephants Were Young. So the film was called Elephants Were Young in 2016, both narrated by William Shatner. Hey, I love Star Trek. Anyway, we are here to celebrate elephants. Patricia is an incredible voice, and the people speaking tonight are explorers from all around the world. We at the Explorers Club are honored to be here and to be a part of this. So I'm going to be introducing Patricia. She's going to take it from there and introduce her panelists. There will be presentations and Q&A, and I'm excited to learn as much as I can about all the exciting work that's happening. So without further ado, let's celebrate pachyderms. We are pro pachyderms around the world today because of World Elephant Day. And Patricia, I want to welcome you to the Explorers Club.
Thank you, Mark. Wow, that was great. Well, I have to say, firstly, I must thank the Explorers Club and Constance Defeaty, Rosemary Keogh, and Passer, also Satish Venkatesh, they're out there somewhere, and of course you, Mark, for helping to make this happen, this World Elephant Week. It's been incredible how we've all pulled this together over these last few weeks. But before I introduce our distinguished speakers this evening, I'd also like to thank my World Elephant Day team. There's a lot of people behind the scenes that make kind of World Elephant Day happen each year. And of course, even from the very beginning, 10 years ago, my co-filmmaker, Michael Clark, who started on this elephant journey with me over 10 years ago, our campaign communications director, Ann Dillon, our campaign manager, Anna Grebs, and our social media manager, Graham Wheeler, have all been working really, really hard to make this World Elephant Day, this 10th anniversary, a big success. So just to give you a little bit of background on World Elephant Day, I mean, people often ask me, like, how and why did I start World Elephant Day? I mean, how does somebody start a global day? So it was really back in 2011. Michael and I were in Thailand. We were filming our two documentaries there, Return to the Forest and When Elephants Were Young. And we were working with the Elephant Reintroduction Foundation, which is an initiative of Queen Surrogate of Thailand, and they reintroduce captive elephants back to 3 wildlife sanctuaries within Thailand. And as Mark pointed out, I mean, back then, the ivory crisis was just exploding. I mean, it was escalating beyond belief. And with all of this attention on elephants, it was really drawing attention to a lot of the other issues that were impacting elephants, and also particularly the Asian elephants as well were suffering greatly as an endangered species. So because of the complexity of the issues with elephants, I mean, elephants live in so many different countries around the world. Differences in habitat, in politics and culture. How are we going to all come together and solve these problems? And it was pretty clear that we needed to have one day that could bring people together on the issues, kind of like an Earth Day for elephants. And that's basically how World Elephant Day was born. We launched it on August 12, 2012 with the Elephant Reintroduction Foundation in Bangkok. And that day was selected because we wanted to honor the work that they were doing, but also it was the Queen of Thailand's birthday, and it's a national holiday in Thailand. And so that made it seem fitting that that would become World Elephant Day. Of course, at that time, I had no idea that it would grow to what it has become today. And through our annual campaign and our social media outreach, it's become a global movement for the preservation of elephants worldwide, and it reaches millions of people across the globe. When I look back over the last 10 years, I think, wow, you know, it's kind of like we are the PR agency for elephants. Basically, they are our client, as Andrea and I were talking about the other day. It's like when we're doing this work for these animals, we're working for them essentially. And World Elephant Day is exciting. It's active, and it's kind of like running an election campaign for the elephants. It's really amazing how it comes together each year. And the most important thing too for elephant conservation organizations is it really gives these organizations a day to focus on their important work and to bring this attention to the public, and also a very important day for fundraising for their work. And for us as World Elephant Day, I mean, we're still a grassroots organization. We operate on a tiny shoestring budget. We are not funded by any major organization or government. And it's become to mean so much for people. Nonetheless, World Elephant Day has come to mean so much for people ranging from NGOs to scientists to governments, but probably most importantly, as an educational platform for the global public. And of course, every day should be World Elephant Day. But I also think it's important that we do have this one special day that we can bring the world together to focus on these complex issues that elephants are facing for their future survival. And my hope is that World Elephant Day will continue to be a celebration of these amazing animals, these magnificent creatures that we share this planet with, and not just a grim reminder of the threats that they're facing. So to kick off our presentation for this evening, I'd like to show our World Elephant Day video. And the music for this video was actually provided to us by the Scottish folk band Elephant Sessions, who have supported our work in previous campaign years. And the footage is from our 2 elephant documentaries, and it's edited by Michael Clark. So Kevin, please go ahead and roll the video. Okay. Well, welcome to World Elephant Day. So tonight we're going to be hearing from 5 brilliant elephant experts who are going to share their elephant knowledge and wisdom with us. Andrea Crosta will be joining us, Laurel Neme, Zhang, and Sangita Iyer. And later for our panel discussion, Sherman De Silva will be joining us as well. I'm a huge fan of these 5 amazing people. They are all, in my mind, rock stars. And in the interest of time, I don't really have the opportunity to really describe a lot of detail about all the amazing work that they're doing. So please do visit our World Elephant Day website or the Explorers Club website in order to get more information about their backgrounds and also links to their organizations. And also, please, after their presentations, please stick around because we're going to have a really interesting panel discussion. We're going to be learning about some of the hopeful solutions for elephants on the horizon. And then we'll have a Q&A right at the end. So please do put your questions in the chat box and we'll answer those at the end too. So to start off, I'd like to introduce Sangita Iyer. Sangita is a National Geographic explorer. She's a filmmaker and founder and executive director of the Voices of Asian Elephant Society. And Sangita's work focuses on the captive Asian elephants of India and the human-elephant conflict issues there. She's just released her 26-part documentary series, a short documentary series with National Geographic. I believe it was today. And she has a book coming out titled Unshackled, which I think is going to be released very soon. So without further ado, please, Sangita, join us.
Well, thank you so much for the amazing opportunity. And I just want to commend you. And first of all, I want to just say, you know, what you've created is an incredible legacy that, you know, future generations are going to just cherish. And watching the footage that you just provided just brought tears to my eyes. And I'm trying to keep composed. But it was just amazing and just totally moving. And what kind of world are we going to leave behind? I mean, that's a brilliant question to start out with. The other thing I also was caught with what you said about, you know, as though we are doing election campaign. And I thought to myself, only if elephants could vote, who are they going to vote in or out? You know what I mean? So that was just a wonderful thing to get started. But I just want to also mention quickly that, you know, working in this industry has brought, you know, lots of sorrows and ups and downs that we all go through. But I'll get started with, you know, just by saying that elephants' lives matter. You know, at the end of the day, like we talk about human lives matter or Black lives matter, all lives matter, elephants' lives matter too. I just want to bring to you, first of all, a few facts about Indian elephants. Out of the 40,000 plus Asian elephants around the world, India houses about 55% of them, mostly in the southern region. And, you know, the thing is, it was dedicated the heritage animal status, a Schedule I animal status, and all of that stuff. But still, babies and subadults are captured from the wild from Assam and Bihar. And there are approximately 2,500 captive elephants across India, with almost 500 of them in Kerala, which is where I was born and raised, which is where I produced the documentary. The reason that I targeted that particular state is because that's where they have a maximum number of male elephants. Bulls have been captured, and there's a significant gender disparity because bulls are captured for their ivory tusks, as female elephants do not have tusks, and they're slaughtered for ivory, but at the same time, they're exploited in these so-called cultural festivals. And so I produced this film called Gods in Shackles that was released on Amazon Prime. And if you want to get more information about it, you can always look at it. It's heartbreaking to see, you know, what they go through. But I just want to bring some conditions here. They're kept on horrendous, you know, in horrendous places where they're made to stand on their own urine and excrement. They're paraded day and night beneath the scorching sun for hours on end. Emaciated elephants, blind elephants are all paraded, and they're transported in such precarious conditions. It's like when we were filming this, I'm like, oh my God, when is this elephant going to fall? Like there were real scary moments. This is my beautiful Ayyappan. He he was only 23 years of age, I'm sorry. And he died just a few years back, just after my film was released, because they fed him wrong diet. He was forced to eat seeded date, and look at his tummy. This is Ramabhadran, another beautiful elephant. His trunk is paralyzed, and he was forced to parade even with paralyzed trunk, such a harmless elephant. And he still, his mahout or handler still carries the bull hook because they're all terrified of elephants. This is my beloved Lakshmi. She was intentionally blinded. And I had such a special bond with her. And she's the one who helped me connect more deeply into my own soul and awaken my own shackled mind to see what are some of the, childhood demons and things that I was carrying. And she just helped me release that. So watching all this, I decided I've got to do something more than just produce a film. So I created this organization called Voice for Asian Elephant Society. And I had so much anger for people who are doing this. But, over the course of years, I've learned that if we don't take care of people whom elephants come in contact with more frequently, there is no hope for elephants. Therefore, our goal became creating sustainable human communities. And so what we started was to start with positive reinforcement training for captive elephants, which happened in 2019. A wonderful person called Stephen Coyle, who's a positive reinforcement trainer, just volunteered his time. We took him to the elephant or the government camp, and we had the mahouts trained. So we wanted to do some things to change their attitude and mindsets and get them to understand that elephants are not at all scary as they think. And we taught them how to, talk to them literally compassionately. So that was a real life-changing event, not only for me, but even for the mahouts. They were like, oh, we didn't know this, we didn't know that. So that drew attention to the fact that there's significant dearth of information. There's knowledge and information that needs to be shared. Then came the plight of wild elephants. And I saw this image and I thought, oh my God, this is happening in West Bengal. And they are hurling fireballs. Look at this baby elephant. His mouth is like, oh, please don't do this to me. What are you doing to me? And he's trying to catch up with his mom. Just completely was devastating. And I said, I got to work with these people. So the mission changed then from just, talking about rehabilitating captive elephants to protecting and preserving wild and endangered wild Asian elephants in areas where, they're going through such a difficult time with human-elephant conflict. So we thought, if we went there and we taught people, it'll be all cool, but it turns out that they don't even have the basic survival tools like flashlights, for instance. Roads, development is rampant and it is reckless. Roadways cutting through elephant habitats. 78% of the elephant habitats in India is shared with humans. The population there is 1.4 billion, okay? And India is the size 3 times smaller than United States, but has 3 times more people. You can just try it if you can try to imagine that. So there's no place for people to live. It's overpopulated. And so in order to accommodate and sustain people, they are cutting, they're developing all these things, railways cutting through the forest. And of course, forest fires devastating British Columbia and California, but in India, it ravaged about 8,000 hectares of land where elephants thrived. This is in the state of Odisha. This happened just in early March of this year. So where will the elephants go? No matter where they turn, they are faced with obstacles. So I just mentioned all this. One of the gravest threats that these elephants face is electrocution. Farmers are, so there's this, rural community, not rural community, I would say tribal people and people who are poor, they're allowed to go inside the forest. Some of them even encroach, non-tribal people even encroach into the tribal areas. And in order to protect their agriculture plot of land, they install high voltage, illegal electrical fencing. And so many elephants have died because of that. The image that you see at the bottom right-hand corner, the mom and the baby, they were actually electrocuted in their own homes, in the forest, because the wires are just hanging loose. There's structural vulnerabilities, excuse me. And 3 elephants killed because they were trying to cross the road. One of them was a calf, because this is again in Odisha. Electrocution, 7 elephants massacred just by getting electrocuted all at one time, the largest ever number of elephants. And then railways, I showed this to you earlier, fire. So we have focused our solutions in 3 specific districts: West Bengal, Odisha, and Kerala. And we are trying to, implement multi-pronged approaches. Basic necessities like providing flashlights for elephant, saving elephants from electrocution by installing elephant-friendly fencing, of course, corridors to restore their habitats in Kerala. That's what we're doing. Preventing by installing basic billboards, like massive reflective billboards, to stop the drivers from driving so fast. And tribal people, like we're trying to, give them employment and make sure that they go around and they take care of the forest and stuff like that. And we are also cultivating fodder for elephants. So we're going to start planting them inside, and youth empowerment programs, and all of the stuff that I just mentioned. So here are just some images I wanted to share with you. I already talked about these in a nutshell. And flashlights, I mean, this is like, we take it for granted. These people, they don't even have flashlights, right? And so we are really working hard. And of course, the youth, they are the wave of our future. And so we created this project, Asian Elephants 101, which is, by the way, the name of the documentary series, also Asian Elephants 101, that was just released today. And, we are empowering the youth of Kerala. And, this was another huge thing, the Gentle Giant Summit, where we are bringing together various, governmental ministries, because they don't even communicate. You have the electrical department, railway department, all operating in a silo. We just brought everybody together. And, by using the World Cafe methodology, we just, started this integration process where, hey, come on, at least let's talk, how we can work together, kind of thing. And these are some of our strategic partners we work with in India, as well as, in Germany and the United Kingdom and United States. And we were so fortunate to have received endorsements from Dr. Jane Goodall and William Shatner and, Gary Marshall, the Pretty Woman director, and some of these people who actually participated in our virtual concert that we had last year. These are just some of our accomplishments. And racing extinction, this has really, really been, it's at the top of everybody's mind. And, there's research that shows humans make up only 0.02% of, the Earth's biomass, but we've destroyed almost 83% of them. And so saving these endangered Asian elephants is imperative for all of us. These are our board of directors, without whom I couldn't do this. And I thank you so much for the opportunity to share what we are doing and some of the challenges facing in India. And I just want to pass this over back to Patricia. Thank you so much.
Wow, Sangita. Wow, thank you. Gosh, it breaks my heart to see how those elephants are treated we saw that same in Thailand, and it's heartbreaking, the abuse that they endure at the hands of humans. It's, it's hard to watch, but we know it happens. And also, you raised a really important point, which is, where are the elephants going to live? I mean, there's so many humans, and, we're in direct competition with elephants for their habitat. And, so where are they going to go? What are the choices for them? And this leads me to our next speaker, Dr. Zhang, who otherwise known as Aster. And he's joining us live from Beijing. And I'm thrilled to have Aster join us, because I worked with Aster in Yunnan province in Southwest China back in 2009. And that was really just at the very, very beginning of the learning about elephants that I was having. And I was making a film, and we went to study the elephants in Yunnan province with Aster, and we did some filming there and did field research, and it was a fantastic experience. And it's those wild elephants in Sichuan in Yunnan province that are the exact wild wandering elephants that we've all been hearing about over these last few months, have captured the hearts and minds of people around the world. And Aster's gonna speak with us about these elephants today. And I should say that Dr. Zhang is a professor at the Beijing Normal University, and he's the Secretary General of the Society of Entrepreneurs in Ecology Foundation, which is the largest Chinese local foundation on environmental conservation. And annually it raises about $500,000 to restore the elephant habitat in Yunnan province. So welcome, Aster, and over to you.
Hi, thanks, Patricia, for inviting me to join this exciting event, and congratulations to the 10th World Elephant Day. You know, yesterday is China World Elephant Day, and there are a couple of events I participated to celebrate the important day you set up 10 years ago. Congratulations. And today I would like to share some stories and information about those remained small population Asian elephant in China, and what happens to those we call homeless elephant who roaming long distance for about 1,300 kilometers in 500 days, looking for suitable habitat, look for a new home. Now they return back to well, it's still 200 kilometers away from their original home, but they return back in recent days. I would like to share my screen so that you can see some maps. My presentation, the topic is the balance of conservation and development. As you know, that China is the largest developing country still. Although China have a very good, rapid developing economy in the past 40 years, but in the rural area, the local people still need to find their way to find their livelihood. And one of the challenges in Yunnan province, Sichuan, Patricia, you've been visited 10 plus years ago. Local people still want to earn more money to feed themselves. As you know, in the past 2 months, this 15 elephant story, they attracted many cameras worldwide. They about a year ago, they started the journey at Sichuan, and then they moved to north to the Pu'er prefecture, and then to Yuxi, and a month ago they reached Kunming, the border of the capital of the Yunnan province. You know, the CPD meeting will be held by Chinese government next month in Kunming. So everybody say, well, those elephants, they want to participate in the CBD conference. But what's the reason caused the elephant roamed so far? This is really a question to many conservationists in China and worldwide, and Asian Elephant Specialist Group members. We discussed a lot about why those elephants dispersed with long distance, and why many herds of elephant in Sichuan migrated outside the protected area in the past 20 years. So my team did some research on that. One of the photo I would like to show you, this is the little baby elephant. We took the photo in 2007, and we found the nose of her got hurt, so we call her little 断臂, little injured nose. So this is a family. After 14 years, we found in this group. So we know well who they are, and we know where they come from. They come from originally from Xishuangbanna. What happened in the past 40 years in China? And I used Landsat satellite map to show you the change of the wetland cover, the vegetation coverage in Xishuangbanna, all the elephant range areas, including Pu'er and part of the Lincang and Xishuangbanna, these three prefectures with elephant distributed in China. You can see the yellow, that is rubber, and the pink, that's a tea. Those are two important cash forest and very important local economy plantation for local people increased dramatically in the past 40 years. But meanwhile, the green ones, that means that the old growth forest declined about 16% in 40 years. This is a change of land cover in the past 40 years. So, well, for conservationists, we know that old growth forests, they are home for not only elephant, but also biodiversity and other wildlife. And Yunnan is one of the important biodiversity-rich hotspots in China. So that means the conflict between the conservation and development is really a serious problem in the local area. And as you see, the distribution of elephant, the highly habitat, their habitat is highly fragmented, and yeah, this is a current distribution of my elephant in China. The total population is around 300, not too many, not as many as Indian population, but this 300 Asian elephant cause a lot of human-elephant conflict due to the rapid developing of royal economy. Yeah, and with another analysis did by my PhD students last year, we found that elephant suitable habitat, that is not mean old growth forest only, but its suitable habitat reduced over 40% in the past 2 decades in Xishuangbanna, with a rapid expansion of cash forests such as rubber and tea in Xishuangbanna prefecture, where those 15 elephant original homeland. So you can see the change of the habitat, the loss and fragmentation of the habitat are the key to drive those elephants started to dispersal and disperse to find new homeland for them. And meanwhile, we also found the human-elephant conflict. The conflict are highly correlated with the development of a royal economy, royal farmland, and we made an analysis to try to find out those human-elephant conflict hotspots. It's highly overlapped with the rapid developing area. So, well, as you know that in the past 16 years, over 40 people got killed by elephant accidentally, and the annual economy loss caused by elephant riding is about $3 million a year in this elephant distribution area. So the human-elephant conflict is a very important challenge for all the elephant conservation in China, as well as Southeast Asia states, I think. What we are doing now is after working for international NGOs and research institutions 20 years, and I think I need to do something. So I joined SE, Society of Entrepreneurs and Ecology Foundation, China's one local environment NGOs. One of the work we are doing now is to build up partners with different business sectors, such as Alibaba and Taobao philanthropy, and we raised half well, $500,000 annually. I'm sorry, US dollar, $500,000 annually through those online platform to restore and elephant habitat and try to mitigate the human elephant in Xishuangbanna. For example, we set up this camera trap monitoring and human elephant conflict alarm system. We set up in these six communities in Mengyang of Xishuangbanna. And in the past 4 years, we got about 290 elephant camera alarms, and this has significantly reduced the human-elephant interaction in local area, local level, and people know where the elephant come out, so they do not go to that particular area. It's reduced the killing and injured. Meanwhile, we also find some what we call community alternative livelihoods, such as providing the honeybee for local communities, as well as other alternative livelihood pilot project. So we want to find a way for local people to change their traditional agriculture and to find some alternative livelihood to increase their income. Well, so that human-elephant conflict, elephant riding cost damage could be reduced. So we also use this funding to restore about 450 hectare elephant habitat in Menghai County and build artificial salt marsh for elephant. Well, after we built the artificial salt marsh, the elephant did come and they never visit the community again. So this kind of try can mitigate the human-elephant conflict at the local level, but it's not enough. So I published my commentary in the international journal such as Nature call for integrative landscape planning for Elephant National Park so that we can restore large-scale habitat for elephant conservation for their long-term survival. It's good to know that a month ago, I got invited to participate the Yunnan government and state forestry grassland conservation administration. They are planning to build what they call Asian Elephant National Park in Xishuangbanna. Like you can see on the map, that all the dark green are the current habitat for Asian elephant. All of this elephant habitat will be included in this national park. Meanwhile, those yellow area, that community protected area, also be included to build corridors to link this fragmented habitat for elephant in next 5 years. This is really encouraging news to us. I would like to close this presentation to show you those beautiful elephants in the field. As we know that, well, there are another 3,300 elephants in captivity in China in safari park and zoos, but we will never give them a good living condition like Asian elephant in the wild. So we will think about how to provide more we call it environment enrichment for those zoo elephant, and certainly one of the important campaign we are doing now is try to call people do not ride elephant, do not see circus performance. So that's what we are doing now in China. Go back to you, Patricia.
Well, thank you. Wow, Aster, that was amazing. And actually so nice to see that photo at the end. Of course, I remember that photo of Rogers, and we have used that for our own work with the Asian elephants as well. Again, it's habitat, I mean, we look at this reality that we're facing with where the elephant's going to live, and how are we going to manage those habitats, and how do we create these corridors so that elephants can just do what they naturally need to do, and we can just leave them alone. So it's a big challenge, and hard to implement given the complexity of human settlements and commercial crop areas and roads and trains and everything we've done that's fragmented their ability to move freely. And on that note, over to a completely different part of the world. We're going to be joined now by Laurel Neme. And Laurel, she's working as a journalist and author, and very well known for her writing work about elephants. And she will be joining us to speak about the Okavango region of Africa in Botswana, where there are also serious habitat issues. And Laurel has recently been writing with her colleague, Jeff Barbie, a number of articles for National Geographic about this region, and specifically about the oil and gas exploration that's being done there by the Canadian corporation Recon Africa. So Laurel, if you please join us.
Thanks so much, Patricia. I appreciate it. And I'm very honored to be here, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And as Patricia said, I'm a regular contributor to National Geographic and Mongabay Bay, among other outlets, and I've written several books, including Animal Investigators on Wildlife Trafficking and Forensics, and also for kids, The Elephant's New Shoe, about a true story of a baby elephant who needs a prosthetic foot. And I have a bit of a different background because I've focused a lot on policy. And after getting my PhD from Princeton, I worked for years at the US Treasury Department, where I oversaw the environmental and social aspects of investments by multilateral development banks like the World Bank and African Development Bank, Asian Development Bank. And then I did consulting and served as a team leader for couple US aid projects. But I turned more and more to writing after my first book, Animal Investigators, came out, and I saw how much of an impact it had in exposing the problem of wildlife trafficking. And since then, I've written close to 70 articles for National Geographic, with many on wildlife trafficking, and in particular elephants, as you can see here. And elephants are endangered not only from being killed for their ivory tusks, but also from increasing human-elephant conflict, which we've been talking about, and habitat loss and fragmentation driven by development. And I've worked all over the world and in more than a dozen African countries, but Botswana, which is where I did my dissertation research, stands out for a number of reasons. And one of which is the Okavango Delta, which is in the far northwest part of the country. And just to get you oriented, here's a map of the Southern Africa, and you can see the Okavango Delta in the middle. And it's home to the world's largest population of elephants. And the Okavango Delta spreads out in the middle of the sands of the Kalahari Desert. And as you fly in, you can see how the landscape shifts. And if you've ever been there, you know how this inland river delta, which is one of the largest in the world, serves as a mecca for wildlife. And in fact, about 130,000 elephants move freely across this entire region. And it's so important for both water and wildlife that 5 countries, Botswana, Namibia, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Angola, got together to form the Kavango-Zambezi Transfrontier Conservation Area, also referred to as CASA, specifically to protect this area. And there are multiple goals for CASA, but most importantly, to allow for the free movement of wildlife across this area, and also to protect the entire watershed. And water here is very scarce. And over the last decade, Namibia has had at least 3 emergency level droughts across the catchment area. And droughts are very common, and scientists are saying that climate change will make things worse. And it's having a big impact on elephants. And you've probably heard some of these stories in the news. For instance, last year in Zimbabwe, there was a sudden die-off of dozens of elephants in this area that authorities said was caused by a bacterial disease. And according to officials, the persistence of the droughts, of the recent droughts, had left these animals particularly vulnerable to disease. And around the same time, you've probably heard about in Botswana, there was a mysterious die-off of over 330 elephants that eventually the government attributed to cyanobacteria and the resulting toxic algae blooms, which are also made worse by warming from climate change. And this threat is not going away. This is a more recent article from this year, and you can see that something similar is happening again. And all this is simply to emphasize why there's a focus on protecting this watershed. And people in the region are concerned about the water situation here, and especially concerned about how recent oil exploration could affect it. And currently, as Patricia mentioned, there's a Canadian company called Reconnaissance Energy Africa, or Recon Africa, that has licenses to explore for oil across 8.5 million acres. That's 13,200 square miles of land in Namibia and Botswana. That's about the size of Maryland, the state of Maryland, or a little less than Netherlands. It's about 7 times the size of the Grand Canyon National Park in the US. And this license area overlaps with both the Okavango Zambezi Transfrontier Conservation Area, which I mentioned, that's CASA, that's in the red boundary, and also 6 locally managed wildlife reserves known as community conservancies, which are also shown on this map. And in Namibia, about 20% of the country is protected by community conservancies like these. And they're really deemed vital, not only for the communities to generate income from the communities, for the communities, but also to sustain the country's wildlife. And I'm going to share a video from Max Muyumburuko, who's head of one of those conservancies that is located in this oil exploration area. And as you'll hear, he explains both how the community relies on elephants for tourism and also how oil and gas drilling here could potentially affect that. So
I'm representing the Okavango East and West Conservancies and Community Forest Association with the aim to conserve the natural resources, use it in a sustainable manner to derive benefit from the resources to the members or communities within the Okavango East and West. The wildlife that we have, it attracts many tourists coming into Namibia to see elephant, to see the landscape of the Namibia, to see a lot of other species which attract tourists. Now we have been very scared of Recon Africa because now what they are doing, they will be a damage or impact into the environment, the groundwater, the life or health hazard of our communities or our people in the countries. And all this, it will be very harmful to a livelihood of our fellow Namibians or the communities. It will impact all the living creatures. And once the elephant is normal, once any wildlife species is normal, there is no tourist. If no tourist, there will be no income or no money that we are going to generate. The local communities, there will be no chance for them to get income or to get a well-paid job. Recon Africa is saying that the required skills or expert skills which they are looking for cannot be found within Namibia.
And so, as Max said, people living here are very concerned about how oil exploration and development will affect their wildlife and their livelihoods and their water supplies, especially because this industry is very water intensive and is known to be polluting. And plus it's taking place in a fragile and water scarce region with shallow water tables. It's also a concern because many experts have suggested that the company has not followed best practices to protect either the water or the environment. Still, others have expressed concerns about how loud noises and vehicle traffic from drilling and a seismic survey that's being done could disrupt elephant movements and behavior, and how oil infrastructure like roads, power lines, well pads, and fences could possibly affect and fragment habitats. And still others are worried about the increased human presence exacerbating human-wildlife conflicts or potentially leading to increased poaching, all effects that are well documented in the scientific literature. And as Patricia said, together with my colleague, Jeff Barbie, we've written, he's also an Explorers Club fellow, we've written 6 articles on the situation for National Geographic. And if you're interested, you can find them all at nationalgeographic.com or on my website, laurelneme.com. And concerns about this project are growing. UN bodies like UNESCO recently expressed concern. And in June, 2 members of Congress urged the US Secretary of State, the Attorney General, the Securities and Exchange Commission Chairman, and the US Aid Administrator to undertake a thorough and coordinated investigation into the serious problems that have been raised. And notably, they've gone on record with their worries that this development risks serious and potentially irreparable harm to a unique and vulnerable and irreplaceable ecosystem that is vital for both people and elephants. And while we don't know what will happen next, in a broader sense, this region also has become a front line in a battle over how we value resources and decide what's worth protecting and how we follow through on that. So I'll turn it back to you, Patricia. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurel. That it's extremely unsettling to see, how industry now is also one of the biggest impacts on the habitat, diminishing of habitat. So we've got not just human development and places where people are living in cash crops, but industrial implications as well. Again, taking more and more habitat away from elephants. And at the same time, so while we're fragmenting their habitat and these elephants are all being, forced and squeezed into much smaller areas, comes the conflict issue. And with the conflict issue comes the management issue. And then we get into, well, now there's too many elephants. And so what are we going to do with the elephants? And then we get into the hunting, and then we get into the poaching, which leads us to that other side, the dark side of what's happening with African elephants specifically, and to a lesser extent, Asian elephants with the poaching, and how that whole trade and industry is being implemented, which leads us to Andrea Crosta. Andrea is joining us this evening. Andrea is known for his undercover work, busting wildlife traffickers. Because a lot of his work is undercover, there is a lot he can't tell us, but he's also the executive director and co-founder of the Earth League International. And Andrea is going to speak to us tonight about the illegal wildlife trade and focusing on some of those supply chain dynamics and what goes on behind the scenes. Thank you, Andrea. Please join us.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here. I'm sharing my screen now. You see it well? Yes.
Yeah, we see it.
So I'm very happy to be here for many reasons, but also because it's a great opportunity, of course, to celebrate elephants and the World Elephant Day. The Explorers Club and World Elephant Day are two organizations and two group of people very dear to my heart. So I'm particularly happy to be here today. We don't have a lot of time, so I will try to cover as much as possible in about 10 minutes. For those of you who don't know us, I'd like to spend just a few words about Earth League International, formerly known as Elephant Action League. Our mission is to fight environmental crime, wildlife crime, and support conservation projects through intelligence gathering, research, analysis, and very important for us, collaboration with governmental agencies. Yes, we are an environmental organization. We started to operate in 2012. Personally, I come from a mixed background of business and high tech and intelligence and investigations and cybersecurity. So I kind of put together different parts of my life and to create this organization. And it's a unique organization also in the way regarding our team. So most of my team members are former intelligence and law enforcement agency officers, former National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, crime analyst, technology and cyber expert, and multinational undercover operatives and investigators. Of course, there are also conservationists. I have a degree, one of my 2 degrees is natural sciences and zoology, but because we deal with criminals and criminal networks, most of our people have this experience. We are currently working, we are working in 17 countries. Our job is really to find, to understand who are the most important players. It can be oversimplified like this. So in the past years, until now, we identify and directly engage about 32, if not more, criminal networks, transnational criminal networks, trafficking networks, over 250 persons of interest, covering more or less 10 species and 3 different kind of convergence types. So convergence is a very important part of our work for many reasons, and I don't have the time to explain it today, but we work on multiple species crime convergence, meaning different animals and different wildlife products trafficked by the same people, by the same network. So the same person can deal and offer rhino horn, ivory, pangolin, timber, and so forth. We also work with multiple environmental crime convergence. So they are into money, to illegal wildlife trade, but at the same time, they're also into illegal logging and timber mining and illegal fishing. So it's a very interesting way they operate those networks. And finally, multiple transnational crime convergence, meaning those targets, those networks that are heavily into wildlife crime, wildlife trafficking, are also into other kind of crimes, serious crime like money laundering, bribery, corruption, human smuggling. As you can imagine, this kind of convergence, if researched well, it gives us more tools to get the attention of law enforcement agencies that sometimes are not really into going after wildlife cases. Today, we're talking about elephants. And of course, when we talk about elephants, especially the conservation of elephants, we talk about many things, right? Including space and elephant, human-elephant conflict, and working with local communities, behaviors, biology, all very, very important things. But we also learn from the past decades and centuries, actually, that ivory, so poaching and trafficking, was and still is an existential threat to elephants, especially African elephants, of course. And despite the hundreds of millions of dollars spent in the past decades, we haven't solved the problem yet. Again, there's no time today to elaborate on why I think we've failed to protect elephants and what are the most important issues. But I would like to talk about what I think is the most important aspect behind elephant poaching. That is the most visible part of the problem, because it's very visual, it's very cruel, it's terrible. But behind elephant poaching, there is trafficking, and is probably the least known, the least researched, and also funded aspect of the part of the problem. And together with this, the role of transnational trafficking networks, especially transnational Asian trafficking networks. And so before elaborating a little bit on this, it is important to understand that trafficking generates poaching. It's not the other way around. Okay, this is a very important concept to understand. I have researched this topic for more than a decade, and especially during the past 5-6 years with many undercover intelligence gathering operations around the world, targeting the most important wildlife traffickers in the world, traffickers, middlemen. We learn a lot of things. And today I would like to share with you 4 of those things very briefly, but I think there are important things to share. The first one the first thing that we learned is that it's really important to study, research, and investigate the entire illegal supply chain from the beginning till the end, because only by doing that it's possible not only to identify the most important players, but also what I call the most important pressure points on which it is important to focus resources. Unfortunately, if you can imagine more or less the supply chain, let's say from the killing fields of Tanzania and Gabon all the way to Asia, right now and in the past years as well, resources, attention, and money are focused mostly on the 2 ends of the supply chain, the 2 ends of the problem. On the one hand, poaching, with anti-poaching activities. It's a very, very important activities. In fact, as Earth League International, we even support it financially, but they buy time. Anti-poaching buys time, not more than this. On the other end, you have awareness campaigns, also very important activities. We also do a bit of that as well. But as we learned in the past years, it will take a while, okay? We are talking to a potential market of billions of people, and it's not easy to change the mind of the people simply with awareness campaigns. In the meantime, very, very little resources are put in intelligence gathering and analysis. So to understand, to fill the information gap about those transnational networks, trafficking pretty much everything. Again, we have no time today to elaborate on why this is happening, but let's just say that, to oversimplify, that for governmental agencies and even NGOs, it's way easier to fundraise and operate at the 2 ends of the supply chain. Also because it's easier to explain to show things and to explain what you do, rather than going into, as was presented at the beginning, the dark side of the problem, because it's actually very, very complicated. But the result is that very few groups are really taking the time to analyze and research what is happening in the middle. The second thing we learn is that at the moment, let's say we process a lot of people, we meet a lot of people during our operation, but we focus only on the big players. At the moment, we have around 250 persons of interest, which include big traffickers and middlemen in our database and on our radar, so to speak. We engage them directly, most of them in Southeast Asia, Africa, Latin America, and even the United States. And we have identified at least 30 different large international trafficking networks. What we have to acknowledge is that 99% of those big players at the moment are Asian. Chinese, Vietnamese, from Thailand, from Laos, Singapore, Malaysia. And I'm not pointing the finger to anyone or to any state. In fact, we share a lot of confidential information even with China. But this is a very important thing to consider, not only if you want to understand the problem, but also if you want to understand how we can do better. And very important to mention, as I mentioned also at the beginning, those people, those top players, top traffickers are also into a lot about the serious crimes, almost always money laundering, human trafficking, very often drug trafficking as well. We collect information on all of it, again, as I said at the beginning, because then when you put together a confidential intelligence brief and try to get the attention of law enforcement, it's easier to get their attention if you come with more than wildlife crime. The third thing that I learned and that we learn and that I want to share with you is those networks are really complicated networks. These are example of our analytical work that we do on the networks and on those top players. We do criminal network analysis with producing those the classic crime maps that you can see here that help us, but also law enforcement, to understand the connection between all those players, different entities, different companies. We do also social media investigation analysis with another software that help us to investigate social media, how they're connected, these people, for example, on Facebook. Cross intelligence, matching information coming from the field with information existing only in the cyber world. And then we have a partnership with Esri, which is the leading technology company for geospatial intelligence. And this help us to put together really comprehensive reports and also compare wildlife crime to other kind of crimes. Those networks operate at local, regional, and transnational level. They often collaborate with each other, and they easily move products, people, and money across borders with really very little problems. And they are globally connected. And so this is super interesting and very important to understand. In the past few months, we are working now a lot in Latin America. In the past few months, twice, top Asian traffickers in Latin America offered to us ivory and rhino from Latin America. At the beginning, we thought it was a mistake. Sorry? Okay. So traffickers in Latin America are in contact with traffickers in Africa and are able to offer ivory and rhino from Latin America. This is how they are connected with each other. It's an evidence-based work, of course. We collect all kind of information. The last point that I want to mention is that, well, first of all, I forgot one thing when we talk about these people, the last very important thing. Every time we think about demand for ivory, for example, we think about the final consumers, the people who buy an ivory chopstick. But it's not that simple, especially in crime. So those traffickers have been actively fueling demand by making the products available, setting the prices, controlling the offer, and making sure wholesalers receive the goods. So it's not just about the consumer. This is a very important part. Finally, and this is my last slide. Lastly, part of our work is to collaborate with local and international law enforcement agencies by sharing confidential information and participating in capacity building programs. I can tell you that of all the governmental agencies we are collaborating at the moment, there are many, Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia. None of them, by their own admission, is able to properly investigate international Asian trafficking networks and go after the top players. Sometimes they don't even have translators. And this is a huge problem. As you can imagine, this presents a serious problem and explains why our approach is a long-term approach aimed at not only actively identifying and targeting the top players, never the small fish, but also especially help local law enforcement agency to grow the capacity to finally operate at a higher level. And I want to conclude by saying that to make a change, to act effectively, we need political will. Yes, absolutely yes. We need the right laws. Absolutely yes. But we also need governmental agency willing and capable to operate at a much higher level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea. That was extremely interesting and I think very, very alarming and startling for a lot of people, when we start thinking about the syndicates that are behind how not just elephant ivory, but other wildlife, are traded as commodities. And it really puts into question, what are we doing here as a species ourselves, as humanity? I mean, it's we don't have much to say for ourselves, I think, at this point, but I'm hoping that we can actually have some hope. And my intention for this panel, that for the last part of our presentation this evening, is to look at what is some of the hopeful solution that we can look towards. I mean, what have we been doing for the last decade? What have we been doing right? what are some of the good examples and what we can keep striving for into the future. So this would be the theme for our panel discussion tonight, to look for our positive actions. And we're actually going to be joined now also by Dr. Sherman De Silva. Sherman did a presentation yesterday on her work in Sri Lanka with the social cognition of wild Asian elephants. And Sherman is a conservation biologist and behavioral ecologist, also the founder of Trunks and Leaves, and directs the Udavala Elephant Research Project in Sri Lanka. So that is my first question for our panelists this evening, is what are we doing right? What is making a difference? And Sherman, let's start with you. Please tell us about your work in Sri Lanka and what you think offers some hope for us, for the elephants in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, thank you. Oh my, that's such a big question. Yeah, I think, with so much of my experiences with Asian elephants, and I think we have a lot of common issues all throughout Asia. So, for Asian elephants, we've been just talking about wildlife trafficking and ivory and all of that. And historically, of course, that has been a huge pressure on Asian populations. Right now, it's much more so the habitat loss and fragmentation where Asian elephants are concerned. And for that, I think we need both the top-down and bottom-up approaches. I know that there are a lot of governments that want to preserve the cultural and natural heritage that elephants represent for so many different countries, right? And the connection that various different civilizations have had with elephants. And so there is a will in some sense, but that's often at odds with the development agendas that all of these governments have. And that, on the one hand, it's human-centered, because yes, we want development. We want to, improve the livelihoods and economic conditions of various people that, particularly in rural areas that may not have had the opportunities that, those of us who, support conservation that come from cities have had, right? But at the same time, we need to balance out the ecological, the entire functioning of the ecosystems on which we all depend. And that can't be done at the expense of those rural communities. So I think the important thing, and I think this is over and over, we are seeing this as in many countries, working with communities. I think for me, at that grassroots bottom-up level, is the what I put my hope in, because these are the communities that live on the front lines and live with the elephants, and we can't address the needs of the wildlife without addressing the needs of those communities, as Sangita also has pointed out. And so there's what I would call compassionate conservation. I think a lot of there's a certain segment of the population that sympathizes with the wildlife and the elephants, and maybe doesn't sympathize quite so much with humans, because humans are often seen as the problem. But I think that mindset needs to change as well, because it's only when we really actually understand where people are coming from too that we can, I think, make change for the better. So I think the initiatives and the efforts that are trying to do that are where I look to for hope for the future.
I think that's incredibly important. And I believe everybody tonight will have something to speak about with respect to the importance of the buy-in from local rural communities. Laurel, let's go to you with Botswana, and you showed a clip of a local resident speaking out about the work that's being done there, exploration work there with recon and so on. So what's your impression about that, and what do you think is positive going on there potentially with the Okavango Delta?
Well, what's really interesting is that initially when this project had started, most people in the region were not aware that it had been approved or had been taking place. And the laws in the countries do allow for a lot of consultation. And so now that there's more information out there, people have been able to participate in the process a lot more, and they've been expressing their concerns. And so I think that increased awareness and increased transparency is something that's really a positive thing. What that translates into, one will see, but hopefully it would translate into things that they're requesting, like water monitoring and, and a more strategic environmental assessment of the whole issue. Because like Sherman was saying, is that it is about development, and everybody wants that. Everyone wants an income. The question is, sort of what type of jobs, how are they short-term or long-term, and also at what cost? And so those are some of the issues
And the contradiction, between the people in these rural communities. They're entitled to have opportunity and prosperity and so on, but at the risk of what? When we start looking at how habitat is encroached upon, how resources are extracted, how does that whole system involve when you can get that community buy-in with the awareness and the need to protect wildlife and preserve and leave certain areas alone, and just that's decided. These areas are left alone. I mean, I think, Aster was speaking about what's happening in Yunnan province in China. Aster, maybe you can address that a bit more with respect to how the local communities there have been reacting to the movement towards the corridors and mitigation of human-elephant conflict.
I think, first of all, we all know the concept of the participation to engage local people to participate in the conservation efforts together with conservation organizations, government agencies. But first of all, we need to learn what the needs for those community people, especially those indigenous groups at local community. First of all, I think for elephant range areas, those Thai nationalities, they think elephant are symbol of larky, and it's a symbol of their larky or god something. So in their culture, elephant conservation is their in their culture. They say, well, elephant come to visit us. They bring some goodwill to us. They eat some food, some crops. Okay, it's okay. It's fine for us. But for others, we did find that some migrants villages, they treat the elephant, and the attitude is totally different. So first of all, we need to find out what the importance of those traditional culture for the value for our wildlife conservation. It's not only for elephant, but also for other wildlife. For example, in Tibetan Plateau area, local religions, they did protect wildlife for 1,000 years. The same in Yunnan, my Thai nationalities, they protect elephant for 1,000 years. So first of all, we need to learn what the community people really need. Secondly, I believe that the rapid development of rural economy is who got the benefit, not only the community, certainly the government. So how to have those benefit goes to local community. For example, in Shishongbana, Mongyang Prefecture, we have every year we have about 2 million visitors to visit Wild Elephant Valley and bring huge amount of money to local tourism agency. But the local community people got very few money from this tourism. So we need to find a way to have the local community people to get the benefits from the increasing tourism. So I believe this is a kind of benefit stakeholders, how to share their benefits and how to understand the real demand from the local community. This is what I found from the field. In addition, I would like to echo Andrea's point that the wildlife trafficking, especially every trade issue, is really a need international collaboration. I worked on Asian elephant field research since 1999, but I also spent about 10 years working with CITES monitoring illegal killing of elephant program as an international technical advisory group member. I work closely with different agencies in Asia, especially Southeast Asian states, Wildlife Enforcement Network, ASEAN to work on the collaboration to share information, intelligence information, and try to find an efficient mechanism to exchange those intelligence information among ASEAN states in the past, especially 10 years ago. I did see some encourage outcome from that collaborative collaboration among different government agencies, enforcement agencies, so that we can see the success of the Action Cobra funded by USAID and ASEAN years ago. So I believe it's important to set up this cross-continental intelligence information network, so to improve the enforcement to combat wildlife trafficking.
Mm-hmm. Collaboration among countries is an important angle. And over to you there, Andrea. I mean, how do you think this can actually be implemented? I mean, particularly when we're talking about, you know, public awareness and bringing in opportunities for rural communities and so on. How is that possible in your area of expertise? Where do you see that benefiting?
Yes, yeah, exactly. I can comment only on my, you know, in my field, which is wildlife crime and environmental crime. The improvement, I want to echo what Lee said, that yes, in the few past years, I saw a bit more collaboration among, or at least the desire to collaborate, which is the first step. The information sharing mechanism is not there in place yet because it's complicated, but they are working on it. It's also important, and I see finally happening, that some of these issues that we call conservation issues are in fact criminal issues, criminal problems now. If you think about a few years ago in the middle of the elephant poaching crisis, when we were losing 35,000, 40,000 elephants per year, hundreds of tons of ivory shipped from Africa across the world every year, it's clear that it's not a conservation problem anymore, it's a criminal problem. And so it means that the mindset should be different, the tools should be different, the collaboration should be different, the professionals should be different. And when I start talking about it 10 years ago, believe me, nobody really took me seriously. But now I think it's happening. Now it's also clearer the impact that those international traffickers, for example, have on local communities. They poison the social texture of local communities. I call it the temptation factor. When you go into a village and you offer 2-3 years of salary to kill an elephant, I would say yes, personally. I cannot blame them. So these trafficking, international trafficking networks exploit the people as much as they exploit the animals. And I think this narrative, this new narrative finally is circulating a bit more.
Absolutely. I mean, we spoke about that the other day, you know, the impacts of poverty ultimately in a lot of these communities, and the buy-in from the locals on the basis of these animals, these are worth more alive to them than dead. And how does that get brought forward, as Aster points out too? I mean, you get these big companies coming in doing tourist shows and things. None of that filters back to the local people. I know on Tuesday, day 2 of our Elephant Week, Dr. Paula Kahumba talked a lot about what her efforts have been within Kenya to get the local people in Kenya, to buy into the value of their elephants and what that means, but from an overarching economic perspective to the country. So, it's an interesting sort of dynamic when you've got this intrusion of these syndicates that are coming in and taking advantage of people who don't have the opportunity to learn. If we look at in India, for example, then Sangita, there we have, as you mentioned earlier, such a huge population of people, very little habitat. How is that? What are some of the hopeful potential opportunities that could happen there that might bring people into more acceptance of elephants and finding a way to find peace and living together with elephants?
Yeah, well, thanks for that very important question, because in India, the population is, the 52% of the populace is between 25 and 35 years of age. And most of them they live in poverty and they're not educated. When they're not educated, they're jobless. When they're jobless, they go and chase elephants. They start poaching and they start creating this ruckus even within the community, right? So population is an issue that nobody wants to touch. And I've been talking about, how can we find ways to really empower people to control, population explosion that's happening in India right now. So what we are doing is going into different states, and within India, each state has its own kinds of problems. It's not common to every single state. And so in West Bengal, for instance, we are working with somebody in the grassroots level. We have researchers on the grassroots level. They identify, as Aster was pointing out, you have to identify what people want, not what we think they want. And in order for us to do that, we need to work collaboratively with researchers down there. And we are creating awareness. Another big thing that I find a challenge is, why are we not engaging the media as much as we should? Having worked in a broadcast sector, that's one of the topics that I had discussed today when I made a presentation for the National Geographic Explorers, talking about how can we engage the media, by breaking down complex information. Andrea was talking about, everything is interconnected and how complex the center part is, which is intelligence gathering and stuff. So what are we doing to break down that information in a simple language that will attract the media to cover those stories? Because media, they have a huge impact on public perception of everything, especially environmental issues. So that's one of the things that I have been doing. And we've been getting a lot of media coverage. And when I did my master's in environmental education and communication, that was my key. It's like, what are the factors that control the media? What is it that influences? What are the factors that influence them to cover the story? So those are some of the discussions I think, we can have and provide information on our area of expertise. For me, it's communication and, news and stuff like that. But we're also providing youth empowerment by working with local communities, determining what is good for them. The other good thing that we are seeing is there are a lot of awareness, a lot of people that are now more aware, which is one of the things that everybody talked about, right? So that's a good thing that's happening. And I think there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of nonprofits collaborating, because even within the nonprofits, there's just this competition, which is really not necessary, because each nonprofit has different strengths. So what are the strengths that we can, rely upon each other? And so those are just some of my ramblings.
No, and those are great ramblings. I think, we'd like to open it up now to our audience. We've got a bunch of questions coming in here, and a lot of them are actually thematically similar in that are asking about government roles and how much government is doing. I mean, in all of your respective areas of expertise here. So I'll start with this question from Janine. This is for Andrea. The financial institutions, are the financial institutions cooperating with your investigations? She's referring to the EU Ivory MEPs for wildlife webinar, that they could do more. So how is that working? What kind of cooperation is happening between the financial institutions?
It would take me a few hours to answer correctly, but but let's say that personally, I mean, my organization shares confidential information, especially with local and international law enforcement agency. We work with the U.S. Homeland Security, we work with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we share information with Interpol, with CITES, with UNODC, and Thai government, so Mexican government, and so forth. And we are always, I mean, we're often not in control what they do after that, okay? The financial aspect of the problem, of course, is very important. You know, it's the mantra for the past few years have been follow the money, so follow the money. So follow the money, yes, is a great idea, but it's also extremely difficult to follow the money, especially at a certain level. Our targets are, they use a lot of crypto right now. They use a lot of cash. They use a lot of, it's a system, I forgot the name in Chinese. There is a name in Chinese, there is a name in Arabic as well, when you move money without moving money. So I want to give you $1 million in a country. I find somebody in that country to give you $1 million. So you get $1 million, but there is no transfer of money. So it's extremely difficult to come up with who pay what. On top of that, the most important wildlife traffickers in the world are not just criminals, are not just traffickers, are businessmen. They do a lot of legal business. They have import-export companies, hotels, supermarket, restaurants. So they mix everything together. So again, it makes very, very difficult to find, I don't know, to understand, for example, that this particular invoice and this particular permit for export with the payment behind it, there's something wrong. Very, very difficult. And that's why you need intelligence, you need sharing information. You did cross-border. So I'm not sure if I answered the question, but it's a very complex question. At the moment, my feeling is that, my impression is that from the financial side, we are doing less than what we would like to do. We achieve less than what we would like to achieve, not because they are not trying, but because it's complicated.
Patricia, we got you muted.
Yeah, I've been muting and unmuting because our connection got a little bit weak here. I was talking about the complexity of collaboration among government. And, you know, whenever you get government involved with anything, it does get complicated and often doesn't move quickly enough too, you know, which is where NGOs can come into play and companies can come into play. Corporations actually can do very good work with respect to helping conservation issues. One question here for Laurel is, and I guess for all of us too, meanwhile, we've had this pandemic going on for the last, you know, year and a half. And, you know, I'm wondering if that's had any sort of positive benefits to perhaps elephant conservation or wildlife conservation. And then, of course, the question coming in is, how do we assure, to what you were speaking of, Laurel, with some of these mysterious deaths of the elephants in the Okavango, how do we ensure that these pandemics don't occur within wildlife as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know that I have an answer to it. That's not, I mean, it's a very complicated issue, obviously. I mean, I think one thing the pandemics had a lot of different impacts depending where you are, and you know, one being your attention is focused on sort of the immediate health and well-being of your family, and so attention is on that, and rightly so. At the same time, other things have been happening, and so sometimes that's gone under the radar. And meanwhile, travel has ground, you know, it can't say it's ground to a halt, but it's slowed down a lot, and tourism has certainly been reduced, and that's had sort of a twofold impact because a lot of communities who have relied on that income has, that income, some of it's evaporated. At the same time, it's also increased some local pressure, the whole pandemic situation. So you may be seeing more bushmeat hunting and conflict as well. So I'm not sure I have a great answer. Another thing that sometimes tourism has helped as we come out of it is spotting and serving as eyes and ears on the ground. And I think the pandemic's had an impact on that, as well as with rangers not, both on the funding side, but also, again, the health and well-being of people taking priority.
Yes, Sherman has just mentioned that she's been working with some ethical elephant experiences campaigns that help maybe other better ways of people to interact with wildlife, which might actually help with some of these bigger issues about passing of viruses between species, zoonotic passing of viruses. Do you want to speak about that, Sherman, a bit? You were saying you had some perspective on that.
Yeah, thanks, Patricia. Two quick points. One is the pandemic has had mixed effects from our experience in Ottawa. It was the national park that I work in drew millions of people every year, and now that's zilch, that's zero. And so on the one hand, it's had an enormous negative economic impact on all those communities, right? And we've seen last year, unfortunately, Sri Lanka broke its own world record for elephant deaths, Asian elephant deaths, at least, going over 400 last year. And this year we're already sort of poised to beat that, unfortunately. And we've also seen a few, more human deaths as a result. So that sort of lack of the eyes and ears, as Laurel put it, has had also negative consequences on things like poaching, other wildlife issues. On the flip side, the elephants are not bothered by tourists as much in the park, and we've also had a little bit of a baby boom. So, what does that mean? In terms of the effect of tourists, last year actually we took this opportunity and this great pause in tourism to ask people to think about how we experience wildlife. We launched this ethical elephant experiences campaign, with the sort of the fundamental point being that we can be vectors of disease, wildlife are vectors of the disease, and this can pass back and forth, and we've sort of been blithely sort of ignorant of the risks that can cause. We get concerned when the disease comes from wildlife to us, which is the case with COVID, right? But humans can transmit pathogens to wildlife, and when we're interacting, and especially as tourists, right, people going all over the world, and in many cases wanting to interact and touch and feed and interact with wildlife, that can put them at great risk. And it's particularly a concern for endangered species like Asian elephants, where there's many fewer individuals than the 7 billion humans that are on this planet. So I actually have an op-ed out on Manga Bay today discussing this very issue, and we have resources on our website at trunksandleaves.org about how people can be responsible once things get back to quote unquote normal, if we ever do, and how that might look like going forward.
Absolutely, the protocols by which we should be interacting with wildlife and wild places. I mean, I've always been a fan of leaving places alone. I mean, one of the things that was interesting for me with working with the Elephant Reintroduction Foundation and those reintroduction elephants in those areas, those wildlife sanctuaries are not national parks, so people don't visit them. They're actually meant to be protected areas, replenishing habitat, replenishing elephant population. So that's an important element we should be looking at. And so Sangita, you mentioned the pandemic in India. We're moving into that subject now. I mean, what have you seen there with respect to how that's impacted elephants? Has there been any benefit to the pandemic? on that level?
It's been devastating, Patricia. Actually, in this Odisha state alone, which has the fifth largest number of Asian elephants in India, there are approximately 1,900 of them, and 48 elephants have been literally massacred just as of yesterday. And what is happening is poachers, given that, the forest authorities are not going into the forest, are not monitoring the areas, are not doing what they're supposed to do. And I personally find that, and this has been actually validified or validated by people, on the ground, that they're using it as an excuse to not do the work that they do. It's the complacency, that apathy that sets in as to what am I going to do now that pandemic's here, using that as an excuse. And so what happens is there's nobody to monitor the forest, and elephants are getting killed by poachers. Besides, the electrical company there, they have all of their structures. There are crazy structural vulnerabilities, because what they have done is they have set their air breakers just 3 feet above ground rather than higher. It's not protected. So poachers can connect the wires and just put them across, like, into the forest areas. And that's been going on as well. And Odisha is also a mining hub, even though the pandemic has been, devastating for many industries. It's not been so for mining. It's just like going on unabated. In fact, Odisha supplies 40% of the iron ore for India alone. And so the core forest areas where elephants roam, those are the areas where they can find rich minerals. So they're going after that now. Besides, the governmental agencies, they're using pandemic as an excuse to just sign off, go ahead, do the development. Nobody's paying attention. As Laurel said, people are focused on their health and family and stuff. So governments are taking advantage of that and exploiting this and saying, okay, giving permits to do the mining and stuff like that. So everything has become so anthropocentric, and it's just very devastating. I mean, at this point, I'm sorry, I don't have anything positive to say about what's going on, except just continuing to work with the people there and just continue to do awareness. I've had a chance to do a lot of awareness programs through virtual thing with the forest departments, trying to, empower them. But by the end of it all, I'm like, oh gosh, I think they've probably fallen asleep. So I don't know. Anyway, so.
Well, I think you've actually indirectly answered one of the questions that had come in for you, which was about, what is the government doing there to help with the hanging wires and the trains, and is there any effect that they're having?
So, sorry, go on.
Well, if you want to answer that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I was going to answer that by saying that it's the petitioning that we have started doing. I've written a letter to the Ministry of Energy, to the Ministry of the forest, as well as to the company, the power supply company, saying we need to work together. And then what we did was we partnered with an organization in the UK. We did a massive media campaign, and one of the members of parliament is involved now, and he knows somebody higher ups in this electrical company. And so we're going the roundabout way, because you're not able to push the government to do anything. It's like they are so inert. It's like an inert object that you just can't even push. Come on, let's just get something done, right? And so we are now going the other way around, and we're talking with UK because they're closely connected with the Indian culture and stuff like that. So we are dealing with that, and plus the media blitz. Even then, it's hard to get them to really mobilize them and to do anything at all. However, I have something positive to say about West Bengal, where we are also working. When I wrote this letter to, again, the same problem, the government there, the forest department there, they launched a court case against the electrical company. They're taking them to the High Court in West Bengal, in Kolkata. And they have also gone door to door campaigning and telling the farmers there's no more electrical fencing that you do illegally, because these are the legal ramifications. So that has threatened them a little bit. And the elephant deaths have declined by 50% in Odisha. So that is something thankful that I'm working with people at the local level. And so it's kind of working that way.
Well, that's something positive, though. I think now I'm going to move it to one of the questions that's come up essentially for all of you, and I guess all of us, myself as well, is how do we all keep going? How do we all keep going with the work that we're doing and if you're not feeling dismayed every day? What keeps you all motivated and hopeful? And is it really feeling like we're all fighting a losing battle? And are the elephants, our canary in the coal mine? I mean, what keeps us all moving forward with this? What are we hoping for? Aster, why don't we start with you there in China, another country with a very large population? What keeps you going in your work?
Yeah, I still remember during one during a meeting with Zhang a couple of years ago when she visited China. She told us among a group of young conservationists, she said, well, we need to do something and we need to have all the people know what we have done, some positive, we made some positive achievement for wildlife, for conservation. Well, she also mentioned that many media or newspapers, well, not for you, Patricia, but most of the newspapers, they used to report some bad news, well, to attract eyes, but they ignored those little things people did with a positive achievement. So I used to tell to my colleagues and my students that we just need to do what we can do and to achieve what we can make, even if it's a very little outcome. I worked on every trade issue in China since 2005, and after 10 years, there's a little hope that we can make any progress. So I wrote a worldview article published in the journal Nature called for China to ban a national ban every trade in China, and a lot of progress. After that, I mean, well, when Prince William visited China, and before his visit, UK Environment Minister come to China and had a breakfast with a group of NGO representatives, and she asked for what we can do for elephant, and I told her that you need to ask Prince William to tell the whole story of the poaching, the every trade to China president. Otherwise, he will never know the true story behind. Prince William did, and he told us after his meeting with President Xi, and he said, well, I raised this every trade issue to your president. Then after 2 weeks, the Xi's office asked my team to submit our survey report, and well, it never happened before. So you can see any little try or any little thing we made can make something different in future, or well, we can do something good for elephant, and they will know what happened in future. But I don't know. But we need to do what we can. Yeah.
Very true. Andrea, what about you? I mean, you're dealing in the dark side of things. What keeps you going?
It's relatively, I mean, I have no escape. I was born like this, so I don't even need to hope, actually. For me, it's like fighting for your family, right? When you fight for your family, you don't need hope. You just do it every day. You wake up and you do it, regardless of the outcome. And you do it again the day after. So that's why I always say that it's time to use less hope and and do more other things. You know, hope sometimes is a double sword, double-edged beast. No, but we don't need hope. We just have to agree that we just fight for elephants or jaguars or forest or whales, doesn't matter, and that's it. And tomorrow I wake up and I do it again.
Laurel, what about you?
Yeah, I think sometimes issues seem so big, and what Aster was saying too is, and they seem so big, but I think when you realize that even small steps make a big difference, and sometimes you won't see that you contributed to that small step. And I think that's another reason why I like writing for kids as well, is because you actually see and get ideas from their enthusiasm and from their, I've worked with enough kids as well and seen how they've had an impact in their communities. That was it big enough or was it not? Like in the state of Vermont, there were groups of kids over a period of 8 years who wrote letters to their legislators, and they held a march for elephants. They built tusks with pool noodles and paper mache. And it just started because, one kid loved elephants and they talked to another kid and they'd seen what was happening to them. And you saw this in Hong Kong as well, where groups of kids were talking to their parents and changing attitudes, and one thing becomes another, and soon it's a movement. And so I think that's one of the things that keeps me going, is this, passion, and also that small steps make a big difference.
Sherman?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that question, because I always ask people this myself, and I think I think a few people have touched on this, and the fact that we as a culture, I think in general, just overwhelmingly focus on the negative has something to do with this, and conservation, of course, can be very heavy in that way. And I do think we need more stories and more media and more sharing of the positive. I mean, there are things like conservation optimism, that's a network out there, and sort of pinging off of that, we started our own quote unquote elephant optimism. And I encourage everybody to send us stories about what's going right so that we can, share those under this banner of elephant optimism. And likewise on the theme of young people, once upon a time, I think there's always a generational transition going on, right? And people always look to the younger generations in the future, and they signify hope or whatever. But I think in conservation, there's a shift happening, in which in many places conservation was once something that was done by the affluent from the outside, and something quite honestly very colonial in its approach. And that has been shifting as well, with awareness and being much more locally driven and much more, I think that stands a better chance if this keeps going, not just, looking to the next generation, but genuinely driven from the very communities in which that needs to happen. And so increasingly, seeing, for instance, young conservationists, young researchers, young scientists, people who may have been educated abroad, going back, doing the work in their own home countries. That's the kind of thing that I think is really cool and can, push us through this, what I think of as the hourglass, right? There was this moment of, there's this really critical, pivotal crunch that we're in, which is the narrow part of the hourglass. And I think we're going to come out on the other side if this keeps up better for it.
Yes, I'm with you on that. And Sangita, we started with you, we'll end with you. What keeps you doing the work you do?
Yeah, well, thank you. And I agree with what Andre said. He was talking about not being attached to what you do. That's one of the things that, the Bhagavad Gita scriptures teach us, is just to give unconditionally, just to do things unconditionally, but also for me to empower the youth and see the curiosity. I make them the stars. Like when I go and I talk to them, I call them my ambassadors, and I gave them education certificate, like for, going through this retreat program that I provided for a week. And I love what Aster also was saying, that, little things that you see positively, you just kind of ensure that you appreciate what people do, right? You ensure that you give gratitude. Hey, thank you, man, for thinking of me. Little things like that. And I just love what also Charmaine said, like at the end, like she was talking about the whole millennial generation, right? And for them, it's like, just leave us alone. Just let us do what we want. Just tell us what you want us to do, but we'll do it our way. Right. And so just to give that flexibility, that liberty, I get to learn from them as well. And so for me, it's a learning, giving, sharing experience, non-attachment, and just spending a lot of time with Mother Nature and journaling my heart out. And I cry a lot when I do that. I've learned to express my emotions, so you can't tell that, but I'm just saying, like, I cry a lot when I journal. It just helps you release your feelings. So those are some of the things that keeps me going, and my faith in the universe and the beautiful spirit that brought us all together. And I just think that this individual, one mind, one spirit sentiment that I try my best to carry with me, it really keeps me going. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, all of you. I mean, we're out of time, and I think we could all talk for a long time about all of these important matters and issues and complexities and why we get up in the morning. But this has been an absolutely fantastic week. And thank you so much, Explorers Club, for having this World Elephant Week and helping us celebrate World Elephant Day today, our 10th anniversary. It's meant so much to me personally, and I think to everybody. Thank you all. You guys are all incredible, amazing speakers, doing incredible work. And I'd like to say thank you to our Explorers Club team and
Patricia,
Pastor Kevin Murphy.
Sorry, I just wanted to interrupt because you didn't say what you do. What keeps you going? I wanted.
What keeps me going? Well, there's a lot of work to do. I'm kind of driven even as a young person to fix problems. I'm just motivated to fix problems. I don't have any choice in the matters the way that I see it. I mean, this beautiful, creative, interconnected, beautiful, mammoth, amazing planet we live on. We're part of it. I believe in the greater global system, the interconnected spirit of Gaia. I believe that I'm here to do this job, and my job is to help facilitate and communicate in any way that I can. It's my job, is the way I look at it. And that's what motivates me every morning. It's what I'm here to do. So on that note, I'd like to thank the Explorers Club and our team, and Passer, Mark Fowler, Kevin Murphy, and all of you for joining us. And come back on Monday, because there's more. On Monday, we've got night lectures starting, the series, the night lecture series. And the first Monday is Journal Journeys with Jim Davidson and Wade Davis on Everest, Then and Now. And our host will be Angela Schuster. So if you liked our World Elephant Week, stay tuned, because more is coming from the Explorers Club. Thank you all very much. Thanks for sharing World Elephant Day.
Thank you.
Happy World Elephant Day.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.